Ja, hallå klassen. Nu ska vi titta på sista delen av kapitel 1. Nämligen den vetenskapliga metoden. And this time I will go over to English for variation. And try to talk this through in English. The scientific method is the scientist's systematic approach to investigate and understand nature. And as said before, the natural sciences are biology, physics, and chemistry. And if we go to physics, for example, this is from a physics book. But I will delete this and talk about the methods of science. If you remember, we did an exercise where we first made a puzzle out of 4 pieces, and then we had to pull the pieces apart because we added another piece to the puzzle and had to arrange the puzzle in a new way. And this is a metaphor for how theoretical models can merge, evolve in the natural sciences, where the initial pieces of puzzles represent observations or experiments that we have made and talked about and tried to arrange to a theoretical model. For example, that the Earth is flat, which it is for practical purposes. But then we add another piece or puzzle. For example, seeing the top of a ship emerge over the horizon before the rest of the ship. And how could that possibly be? And we arrange this to make a new model of the Earth, that the Earth is round, not flat. But it also has to be very, very big so that it is still flat for practical purposes. We can make maps of local areas that are flat and get by with them. But the theoretical model that has evolved is that the Earth is actually round. And this is a step that humankind has taken in the name of science with the scientific method by adding new observations or a new experiment. So if new information comes to light, we must always be open to change the way that science have always changed and change our model. Yes, we are on chapter 1.3, scientific method. Scientific knowledge is based on research about nature, and its purpose is to make us better understand the world. And we can vary between methods depending on what we want to investigate. This could be an experiment, it could also be an observation or a simulation, but it always begins with a question. Like, what shape is the world? Or how do I make the best toast? Or whatever question you have, you try to formulate it as precise as you can. And a question in scientific form is called a hypothesis, which is not a question anymore, but it's a statement that we want to try. Is this true or false? And that was a hypothesis. It's an assumption, but it all comes, of course, from questions about the world. And sometimes the experiment means that the hypothesis is valid, and then we can use it to contribute to our theory. But sometimes our hypotheses are just wrong, and then we're really done, and we make new hypotheses. If the hypothesis is right, but doesn't fit to the theory, there is a revolution or a change in the paradigm, change in the worldview, as for example, when the shape of the Earth had to be re-evaluated, and that will probably lead to more questions and more experiments until we have evolved a better theory. So, except for experiments, we can also make observations or digital simulations in a computer. These are all scientific methods in the natural sciences. And in biology, or physics or chemistry, but if you have two groups of people, for example, if you want to examine something about the human body, you should always, when you test your hypothesis, have an experiment group and a control group to see that it's actually the factor of the hypothesis that makes a change, that makes that there's one variable that is different between the groups. So we don't test many things at once. It's good to sort that you have one variable at a time to make the best experiments, to be sure of what causes what. And sometimes some things are impossible to experiment on, like, for example, the outer universe, but that is still subject to hypotheses and observations. So we have experiment, observation, and the third method is simulation with computer programs that mimic reality in some way. For example, how a population grows generation for generation over time, or how the temperature can change on Earth, or how an evolutionary process can take form. Here's a couple of scientists. Of course, they gather data in form of tables and diagrams. And for example, you could measure the grass each day, and for example, you could have the variable of how much water you give to different groups of plants to study how does the supply of water contribute to the growth of this specific plant. Of course, you get a better result if you do the experiment over and over, and also if you let other research groups make the same experiment. To make sure that the researcher gets the best results, you should, if you can, apply a blind study where the researcher doesn't know which sample is which. Example, if you want to try a new drug for medication, it's good to avoid placebo effects and other effects like that by not letting the control group know that they're a control group, and not letting the ones who actually get the drug know that they are not the control group, so that you don't get the psychosomatic effects. So if you can, do a blind study and double-blind studies where neither the researcher or the participant know who is the control group and who is the study group. So always weigh in all results on all experiments, and always be the scientific method is to its nature evolving. When new knowledge becomes available, you may have to change the whole theory. And often a question, even if it's answered, leads to new questions, more research in the field. And when we come to evolutionary theory and cell theory, there is many experiments that have been made that all fits into the same theory, for the theory to be called a theory, for the theory to hold. And the theory should also be able to make predictions that if evolution works like this, then our simulation program should give these results. And it should be coherent and understandable. The cell theory, the evolutionary theory, and also the theory of gravity, how objects fall to the earth. Yeah, here's the paradigm shift of a new experiment that doesn't fit with the old paradigm, with the old worldview. The worldview have to change. Revolution or paradigm shift. So in summary, this is a method. Researchers ask questions, they make hypotheses, they use a method such as experiment, observation or simulation. They get data and they draw conclusions. And if a lot of experiments fall into the same theory, for example, cell theory, how cells are constituted, then we can call it a scientific theory.